Ladies and gentlemen, today we journey back to one of the most decisive moments in European history, the Battle of Vienna, fought on September 12, 1683. This battle was not just a clash of empires. It was a struggle for survival, a turning point that reshaped the future of Europe. The mighty Ottoman Empire, at the peak of its power, sought to conquer Vienna, the gateway to Western Europe. But what followed was an epic defense, a grand coalition, and a charge that would echo through the ages. To understand the significance of the Battle of Vienna, we must first examine the larger context of Ottoman expansion in Europe. By the late 17th century, the Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful empires in the world, controlling vast territories across the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeastern Europe. The empire had been expanding steadily for centuries, conquering lands from the Balkans to Hungary, and had become a formidable force that European powers feared. The Ottoman strategy of expansion was rooted in both military conquest and administrative control. Using highly disciplined janissary troops, sophisticated siege warfare tactics, and a well-organized provincial system, the Ottomans had established dominance over regions that had once belonged to Christian kingdoms. The conquest of Constantinople in 1453 had been a turning point, solidifying Ottoman supremacy and demonstrating their ability to challenge Europe's strongest states. By the mid-1600s, the Ottomans had already pushed deep into Central Europe. Hungary had been largely under Ottoman rule since the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, and the empire maintained a constant military presence along its western frontier. The next logical step was Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg monarchy. Controlling Vienna would not only secure Ottoman rule over Central Europe, but also provide a strategic advantage for future campaigns into the German states and beyond. Vienna was a symbol of European resistance against Ottoman domination. It had withstood an earlier siege in 1529, led by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, but the city had barely survived. Since then, the Ottomans had continued to strengthen their position in the region, and by 1683, they saw another opportunity to strike. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, a highly ambitious leader, was determined to accomplish what his predecessors had failed to do: capture Vienna and bring the Habsburgs to their knees. His vision was not just military, but ideological as well. The conquest of Vienna would send a powerful message to Europe, proving Ottoman superiority and expanding the empire's influence into the heart of Christendom. In the spring of 1683, Kara Mustafa Pasha assembled one of the largest armies the Ottoman Empire had ever fielded. With an estimated 150,000 soldiers, including elite janissaries, cavalry, and artillery, he set out from Edirne, the Ottoman capital, marching through the Balkans toward Austria. His army was well supplied and reinforced by Ottoman vassal states, including forces from Transylvania, Moldavia, and Wallachia. As they advanced, towns and villages fell before them, and panic spread throughout Central Europe. For the Ottomans, the conquest of Vienna was expected to be a decisive and swift victory. The empire had successfully taken countless fortified cities in the past, and Kara Mustafa Pasha was confident that Vienna would fall. He believed that by crushing the city, the Ottoman Empire would break the last major barrier standing between them and further expansion into Europe. However, despite their numerical superiority and extensive preparations, the Ottomans underestimated both the resilience of Vienna's defenders and the determination of European forces to prevent their advance. What was intended to be a triumphant march into Vienna would soon turn into a desperate and costly battle that would alter the course of European history. The Siege of Vienna in 1683 was one of the most intense and desperate military confrontations of its time. It was not just a battle for territorial conquest, but a clash between two great civilizations, the Ottoman Empire and the Holy Roman Empire, each fighting for dominance in Central Europe. The siege lasted from July 14 to September 12, 1683, a grueling 2-month ordeal that pushed the city of Vienna to the brink of collapse. Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg monarchy, was a city of strategic and symbolic importance. If it fell, the Ottomans would gain a powerful foothold in Central Europe, allowing them to advance further into the German states and potentially even into Western Europe. For this reason, the city's defenders were determined to hold their ground at all costs. The arrival of the Ottoman army. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha led a massive force of approximately 150,000 troops, consisting of elite janissaries, cavalry units, and auxiliary forces from the Ottoman vassal states of Transylvania, Moldavia, and Wallachia. Their march toward Vienna was relentless, and as they moved through Hungary, they encountered little resistance. The Ottomans laid waste to villages and smaller towns along the way, spreading fear throughout Central Europe. By early July 1683, they had reached the outskirts of Vienna, surrounding the city and preparing for a long siege. Vienna's defenses were formidable but not impenetrable. The city was protected by thick stone walls and bastions, and a garrison of approximately 11,000 soldiers, led by Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, was prepared to defend it. However, despite their courage, the defenders faced significant challenges. Vienna had not been adequately reinforced before the Ottoman advance, and its food and ammunition supplies were dangerously low. The civilian population, numbering around 60,000, was also trapped inside the city, adding to the crisis. The brutality of the siege. From the very beginning, the Ottoman assault was relentless. Kara Mustafa Pasha employed a combination of heavy artillery bombardment and mining operations to weaken Vienna's defenses. The Ottomans dug extensive tunnels beneath the city walls, attempting to place explosives and create breaches. Repeated assaults on key points of the city's fortifications put immense pressure on the defenders, who were forced to repair damaged sections of the walls while fending off waves of attacks. Inside the city, conditions worsened as the weeks passed. Food supplies dwindled, and hunger began to take a toll on both soldiers and civilians. Disease spread rapidly due to overcrowding and unsanitary conditions. Morale was low, but Starhemberg refused to surrender. He sent desperate messages beyond the city, calling for reinforcements from the Holy Roman Empire and its allies. However, with the Ottoman army encircling Vienna, no help seemed to be in sight. Kara Mustafa Pasha, confident of victory, made a critical decision. He chose not to launch an all-out assault, but rather to starve the city into submission. He believed that Vienna's defenders would eventually break under the pressure, allowing the Ottomans to take the city with minimal losses. However, this strategy gave the defenders crucial time to hold on and allowed European reinforcements to mobilize. The moment of crisis. By early September, Vienna was on the verge of collapse. The Ottomans had breached parts of the outer defenses, and it was only a matter of time before they stormed the city. The defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, prepared for a final stand. The people of Vienna, despite suffering from starvation and disease, continued to support the troops, knowing that surrender would mean slaughter and enslavement at the hands of the invaders. Just as all hope seemed lost, distant signals from the hills to the north brought news that would change everything. The Holy League, a coalition of European forces led by King John III Sobieski of Poland, had arrived. The fate of Vienna now hung in the balance, as one of the most dramatic battles in history was about to unfold. The relief of Vienna was not the work of a single army, but rather a historic collaboration of European powers that set aside their differences to confront a common enemy. This alliance, known as the Holy League, was formed out of necessity, uniting Christian states that had long been rivals. The fate of Vienna, and perhaps all of Central Europe, depended on this coalition's ability to work together against the powerful Ottoman Empire. The urgency of the situation. As the Ottoman siege of Vienna dragged on through the summer of 1683, it became increasingly clear that the city could not hold out much longer. Despite the courageous efforts of the defenders under Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, Vienna was on the brink of collapse. Food supplies were nearly exhausted, disease was rampant, and the city's walls had suffered extensive damage from Ottoman bombardment. Emperor Leopold I of the Holy Roman Empire, who had fled Vienna before the siege began, desperately sought reinforcements to save his capital. He sent urgent pleas for help to neighboring Christian rulers, warning that if Vienna fell, the Ottomans would have a direct path into the heart of Europe. The message was clear: either the European states would unite, or they would face Ottoman expansion alone. The formation of the Holy League. The response came in the form of a military coalition known as the Holy League, consisting of troops from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Holy Roman Empire, and several German states. This alliance was historic because it brought together rulers who often had their own territorial ambitions and conflicts, but now faced a greater threat. King John III Sobieski of Poland emerged as the key leader of the coalition. A seasoned warrior and strategist, Sobieski saw the defense of Vienna as not just a military duty, but a moral and religious obligation. He was deeply aware that if Vienna fell, Poland itself could eventually become vulnerable to Ottoman aggression. Charles V, Duke of Lorraine, commanded the forces of the Holy Roman Empire. He had already been fighting against Ottoman incursions in Hungary and understood the tactical challenges of facing the massive Ottoman army. Elector Maximilian II Emmanuel of Bavaria, alongside other German princes, contributed troops to reinforce the Christian army, recognizing the long-term consequences of Ottoman expansion. These leaders, despite coming from different backgrounds and often having competing interests, set aside their rivalries to form a unified force. Their goal was clear: break the siege and drive the Ottomans away from Vienna. Challenges in uniting the forces. While the Holy League was a powerful coalition on paper, organizing such a diverse army was not an easy task. Differences in military traditions, languages, and command structures posed significant challenges. The Holy Roman Empire's forces, largely made up of German and Austrian soldiers, had different strategies and tactics compared to the Polish cavalry, renowned for their aggressive and highly mobile warfare. Logistical issues also threatened to derail the effort. The armies had to travel long distances to reach Vienna, crossing mountains and rivers while ensuring they had enough supplies to sustain their troops. Coordinating the movements of thousands of soldiers from different nations required careful planning and diplomacy. Moreover, religious and political tensions simmered beneath the surface. The Protestant and Catholic factions within the Holy Roman Empire had long-standing divisions, and some German princes were hesitant to commit fully to a war that did not directly threaten their territories. However, King John III Sobieski's leadership and diplomatic skills helped maintain unity among the Allies, reminding them of the greater cause at stake. The march to Vienna. Despite these challenges, the Holy League's forces began their march toward Vienna in late August 1683. As they approached, reports from scouts painted a grim picture. Vienna's walls were crumbling, and the defenders were barely holding on. The urgency of the situation became even more apparent when they received word that the Ottomans were preparing for a final, decisive assault. The combined forces of the Holy League numbered approximately 70,000 soldiers, far smaller than the Ottoman army, but highly motivated and well-prepared for battle. They planned to use the element of surprise, striking the Ottomans from the hills surrounding Vienna in a coordinated attack. As the coalition forces climbed the hills overlooking Vienna, the moment of reckoning approached. The fate of the city, and perhaps all of Europe, now rested in the hands of this unlikely alliance. Among the many figures involved in the Battle of Vienna, none played a more decisive role than King John III Sobieski of Poland. His leadership, strategic brilliance, and unwavering determination not only saved Vienna but also turned the tide of the war against the Ottoman Empire. Often referred to as the savior of Christendom, Sobieski's actions during this historic battle cemented his legacy as one of the greatest military commanders of his time. Sobieski's rise to power. Born into a noble Polish family in 1629, John III Sobieski was a man shaped by warfare from an early age. Poland-Lithuania, his homeland, was constantly engaged in conflicts with the Ottomans, Cossacks, Russians, and Swedes, forcing him to develop both political and military expertise. Over the years, he gained a reputation as a skilled tactician and a fearless warrior, particularly in battles against the Tatars and Ottomans, who frequently raided Polish territories. By 1674, Sobieski had risen to become King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania. Despite inheriting a politically unstable kingdom, he was determined to strengthen Poland's military and defend Christian Europe from the ever-growing Ottoman threat. Sobieski saw himself not only as a ruler but also as a protector of the faith, which would later drive his commitment to saving Vienna from Ottoman conquest. Decision to aid Vienna. When Emperor Leopold I of the Holy Roman Empire sent desperate pleas for help, Sobieski was one of the first to respond. He recognized that if Vienna fell, Poland itself could become the next target for Ottoman expansion. However, committing to such a campaign was not an easy decision. Poland itself was recovering from internal struggles, and many Polish nobles were hesitant about sending their armies so far from home. Sobieski had to use his political influence and charismatic leadership to persuade his advisors that defending Vienna was not just Austria's problem, but Poland's as well. Eventually, he convinced them, and with about 30,000 Polish troops, including his elite Winged Hussars, he set out on a march that would change history. The difficult march to Vienna. Leading his army from Krakow, Sobieski embarked on an exhausting journey of nearly 400 miles to reach Vienna. The Polish forces had to navigate treacherous mountain passes, cross rivers, and endure harsh weather conditions, all while ensuring their war horses remained strong for battle. The long march was physically demanding, but Sobieski knew that every moment counted. If they arrived too late, Vienna would be lost. Throughout the journey, Sobieski displayed remarkable leadership, personally overseeing his troops and ensuring their morale remained high. He inspired loyalty through his hands-on approach, often riding among his men rather than isolating himself like many European monarchs of the time. He understood that victory would depend not only on military strategy, but also on the fighting spirit of his soldiers. Strategic brilliance before battle. Upon reaching the battlefield on September 11, 1683, Sobieski quickly assessed the situation. The Ottoman army, led by Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, was heavily entrenched around Vienna, preparing for a final assault. Sobieski knew that a direct attack on their fortified positions would be costly and risky. Instead, he devised a bold strategy. Use the terrain to his advantage. The Polish and Allied forces positioned themselves on the hills surrounding Vienna, giving them the high ground, a crucial advantage in battle. Surprise and coordination. Sobieski planned a two-phase attack. First, the infantry would weaken the Ottoman defenses, and then the Polish cavalry would launch a massive cavalry charge to break their lines. Psychological warfare. Knowing the reputation of the Winged Hussars, Sobieski made sure they would be the final, decisive force to charge. The sight of these heavily armored, fast-moving cavalry units would strike fear and chaos into the enemy ranks. As night fell on September 11th, Sobieski met with his allies to finalize their battle plan. The next morning, he would lead the largest cavalry charge in history, a moment that would determine the fate of Vienna and all of Europe. The Battle of Vienna on September 12, 1683, reached its dramatic climax when King John III Sobieski of Poland led what is considered the largest and most decisive cavalry charge in history. This moment not only shattered the Ottoman lines, but also secured the survival of Vienna, marking a turning point in the struggle between the Christian European states and the Ottoman Empire. The charge, executed by the Polish Winged Hussars and other European cavalry units, became legendary and is still remembered as one of the most spectacular military maneuvers ever conducted. The final preparations for battle. As dawn broke on September 12th, the battle was already raging. The Holy League Army, composed of Polish, Austrian, and German forces, had spent the morning and afternoon engaging the Ottoman forces in intense combat. The European infantry and artillery had successfully pushed the Ottoman forces back from certain key positions, but the battle was still undecided. The Ottoman forces, though weakened, were still strong and determined to hold their ground. King John III Sobieski, observing the battlefield from the high ground on Kahlenberg Hill, knew that the moment for his final, decisive action had arrived. He had one major advantage: his cavalry, especially the elite Polish Winged Hussars, was fresh and unengaged, waiting for the right moment to strike. Unlike the Ottoman forces, which had been fighting for hours and were growing exhausted, the cavalry had full strength and morale. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth's Winged Hussars, known as the most elite shock cavalry in Europe, had built a reputation over the past century as an unstoppable force on the battlefield. Their armor, discipline, and sheer impact made them one of the most feared military units of their time. Sobieski knew that unleashing them at the right moment could turn the tide of battle completely. The charge begins, the thunder of hooves. At around 5 p.m., Sobieski gave the order. The largest cavalry charge in history was about to begin. Over 20,000 cavalrymen, including 3,000 Polish Winged Hussars, along with Austrian and German heavy cavalry, lined up across a massive front. Their formation stretched across the hills, overlooking the exhausted Ottoman army below. The Ottoman forces, engaged in heavy fighting and unaware of the full scale of the cavalry attack, were taken by surprise when they saw the glint of armor and the banners of the Polish cavalry appearing on the hills. The sight alone must have been terrifying. The Winged Hussars, famous for their distinctive feathered wings attached to their backs, created a thunderous roar as they galloped down the slopes. The sound of thousands of horses charging together was said to resemble a storm, striking fear and panic into the Ottoman ranks. The cavalry charge was launched in perfect coordination, with Polish Hussars leading the attack, followed by German and Austrian cavalry. The speed and sheer momentum of the charge were devastating. The Ottoman front lines, already weakened by hours of fighting, collapsed under the impact of the charge. The devastation of the Ottoman army. The Ottoman troops, many of whom had spent the entire day fighting against European infantry and artillery, were completely unprepared for such a massive cavalry assault. Their defensive formations, designed to hold against slow infantry attacks, were shattered within minutes of the cavalry making contact. The Winged Hussars, armed with long lances and sabers, cut through the Ottoman ranks like a scythe through wheat. The speed and power of their charge were so great that they not only broke through the first defensive lines, but continued deep into the heart of the Ottoman camp, where Grand Vizier Kerem Mustafa Pasha's headquarters was located. The Ottoman forces, seeing their front lines collapse and their command center being overrun, panicked. What had been an organized siege for months suddenly turned into a chaotic retreat. Soldiers abandoned their positions, fleeing in all directions, while some attempted to regroup, only to be cut down by the relentless cavalry. The symbolism and power of the charge. The Battle of Vienna was no longer just a military confrontation. It had become a symbolic battle between two worlds. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been expanding into Europe, and now, at Vienna, they faced total defeat. The Winged Hussars charge was not just a tactical maneuver. It was a statement that European forces were capable of repelling the Ottoman expansion and turning the tide of history. The charge was so overwhelming that within 3 hours, the entire Ottoman army was in full retreat, leaving behind thousands of dead and their once mighty siege in complete ruins. But the battle was not over yet. Grand Vizier Kerem Mustafa Pasha still needed to be dealt with, and the consequences of this defeat would soon unfold. The Ottoman retreat from Vienna was not just a military withdrawal. It was the complete collapse of one of the most ambitious Ottoman campaigns in history. What began as a confident siege, intended to bring Vienna under Ottoman control and extend the empire's reach into Central Europe, ended in panic, confusion, and humiliation. The crushing defeat at the hands of the Holy League, particularly the decisive cavalry charge led by King John III Sobieski, turned the tide of battle so dramatically that the once mighty Ottoman army fell apart within hours. The chaos of defeat. The Ottoman army, numbering over 100,000 troops at the start of the battle, had spent months besieging Vienna. Their command structure, however, was heavily reliant on the authority of Grand Vizier Kerem Mustafa Pasha, and once the battle began turning against them, order quickly collapsed. Unlike European armies, which had well-established hierarchical command systems, the Ottoman forces were a mix of professional janissaries, irregular auxiliary forces, and troops from vassal states such as Transylvania, Moldavia, and Wallachia. This diversity, which was an advantage in conquest, became a weakness in retreat. Different factions reacted differently to the shifting tides of battle, some fleeing in panic, others attempting to make a stand, and some even turning against their own commanders. As the Holy League's cavalry charge smashed into the Ottoman front lines, confusion spread through the Ottoman ranks. Soldiers in the rear, many of whom had not yet engaged in battle, suddenly saw their comrades breaking formation and running for their lives. What had started as a strong siege force rapidly turned into a disorganized mob, with soldiers abandoning their weapons, artillery, and supplies as they fled. The loss of the Ottoman command center. One of the most critical moments in the retreat came when Polish Hussars and Austrian troops stormed the Ottoman command center, where Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha had been directing the siege. His tents, banners, and personal belongings were seized, further signaling to the Ottoman troops that the battle was lost. Among the spoils left behind was a vast treasure trove of gold, silver, and precious items, which had been gathered in anticipation of Vienna's expected fall. The sheer amount of abandoned wealth revealed just how confident the Ottomans had been in their victory, so much so that they had brought supplies to establish a new administration over Vienna rather than prepare for a retreat. The fall of the Ottoman headquarters sent shockwaves through the entire army. With their leader's base overrun and no clear orders on how to regroup, most Ottoman forces simply ran. Some fled east toward Hungary, while others attempted to cross the Danube River, many drowning in the process. Casualties and suffering during the retreat. The retreat quickly turned into a massacre, as the Holy League forces, now in full pursuit, cut down fleeing Ottoman soldiers. The heavily armored Polish cavalry, along with the Austrian and German troops, chased the retreating enemy for miles, ensuring that no organized resistance could be reformed. The retreat also exposed the weaknesses in the Ottoman supply system. Unlike the well-fed and resupplied European forces, the Ottoman troops were already dealing with shortages after months of siege warfare. The loss of their food stores, gunpowder, and medical supplies meant that even those who survived the initial retreat faced starvation, disease, and exhaustion. Many Ottoman soldiers collapsed from hunger and wounds, unable to continue their escape. Even worse, Ottoman troops who had previously occupied villages and towns along their route to Vienna now found themselves hunted by local militias and peasants seeking revenge. The Ottomans had left a trail of devastation during their march to Vienna, and now, those they had terrorized turned against them. Small groups of Ottoman stragglers were captured, killed, or enslaved by enraged locals, adding to the overall disaster of the retreat. The fate of Kara Mustafa Pasha. While most of his army was either slaughtered or scattered, Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha managed to escape. He fled with his remaining Janissary bodyguards, hoping to return to the Ottoman capital of Constantinople and justify his failure to Sultan Mehmed IV. However, Ottoman military culture was brutal toward failure, especially failures as catastrophic as this one. The Sultan, upon hearing of the defeat, was furious. The siege of Vienna had been a personal mission for the Ottoman leadership, intended to bring prestige and dominance over Europe. Instead, it had ended in utter disgrace. By December 1683, Kara Mustafa Pasha was arrested and executed in Belgrade on the Sultan's orders. He was strangled with a silk cord, a traditional method of execution in the Ottoman Empire for disgraced officials. His failure marked not only the end of his life, but also the beginning of the decline of Ottoman power in Europe. A turning point in history. The Ottoman retreat from Vienna was not just a military defeat, it was a turning point in history. For centuries, the Ottomans had been expanding relentlessly into Europe, capturing Constantinople, Hungary, and large parts of the Balkans. The Battle of Vienna, however, marked the end of their advance and the beginning of European counterattacks. The Ottoman Empire once feared for its unstoppable military campaigns, now faced a crisis of leadership, morale, and strategy. The failure at Vienna shattered the illusion of Ottoman invincibility and emboldened European powers to go on the offensive. The Holy League, sensing Ottoman weakness, would continue to push the Turks back in the years that followed, reclaiming large portions of Hungary, Serbia, and Transylvania. The retreat from Vienna was more than just a defeat. It was the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's decline in Europe, a process that would unfold over the next 2 centuries. But even as the Ottomans fled, the war was far from over. Europe was now on the offensive, and the struggle between East and West would continue for generations. The defeat at Vienna in 1683 was not just a single battle lost by the Ottoman Empire. It marked the beginning of a dramatic shift in power between the Islamic Ottoman world and Christian Europe. In response to the Ottoman retreat, the victorious European forces saw an opportunity to push back against centuries of Ottoman expansion, leading to the formation of the Holy League, a military alliance aimed at driving the Ottomans out of Central and Eastern Europe. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been seen as an unstoppable force, conquering vast territories across the Balkans, North Africa, and the Middle East. They had successfully taken Constantinople in 1453, Belgrade in 1521, and most of Hungary in 1541. Their empire stretched from the gates of Vienna in the west to the Persian border in the east. The Habsburgs, Poles, and other European powers had suffered multiple defeats at Ottoman hands, and many feared that the fall of Vienna would open the door for further conquests into Germany, France, and beyond. But with their crushing defeat at Vienna, the Ottomans had not only lost a battle, they had lost their aura of invincibility. For the first time in over a century, the European powers realized that the Ottomans could be stopped and even pushed back. This realization changed the course of European history, leading to new military campaigns that would eventually reverse Ottoman gains in Europe. The formation of the Holy League, 1684. Recognizing the opportunity to strike back while the Ottomans were weakened, Pope Innocent XI took the lead in forming an alliance between the Catholic and Orthodox Christian states of Europe. This coalition, known as the Holy League, was officially established in 1684, bringing together the Holy Roman Empire, Austria Habsburgs, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Republic of Venice, the Tsardom of Russia, joined in 1686. For centuries, Christian states had often been divided by political and religious rivalries, particularly between Catholic and Orthodox factions. However, after the Battle of Vienna, they put aside their differences to face a common enemy. The formation of the Holy League was unprecedented because it united Western Catholic powers with Eastern Orthodox Russia in a coordinated effort against the Ottomans. With military and financial backing from the Pope, the Holy League began a series of wars known as the Great Turkish War, 1683 to 1699, aimed at permanently weakening the Ottoman hold on Europe. Austria's counteroffensive and the reconquest of Hungary. The most immediate impact of the Holy League's formation was a series of Habsburg-led military campaigns that finally liberated Hungary from Ottoman rule. Since the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, Hungary had been largely under Ottoman control, with only parts of it governed by the Austrian Habsburgs. Now, with renewed strength and unity, the Habsburg armies launched a full-scale counteroffensive. Between 1684 and 1687, the Holy League's armies pushed deep into Ottoman-controlled Hungary, winning major victories. Siege of Buda, 1686. The Austrians, along with Polish and Bavarian troops, recaptured Buda, modern-day Budapest, after 145 years of Ottoman rule. This was a major symbolic and strategic victory, signaling that the Ottomans were losing their grip on Central Europe. Battle of Mohacs, 1687. The Habsburg forces defeated the Ottomans once again at the site of their infamous victory in 1526, reclaiming even more Hungarian territory. By 1688, the Austrians had taken Belgrade, the key fortress city that controlled access to the Balkans. The Ottoman presence in Hungary, Transylvania, and Serbia was collapsing, and for the first time in centuries, the Habsburgs were on the verge of pushing the Ottomans completely out of Central Europe. Venice strikes in the Mediterranean. While the Austrians focused on reclaiming land in Central Europe, the Republic of Venice took advantage of the Ottomans' weakness by launching its own campaign to reclaim lost territories in the Mediterranean. In 1685, Venetian forces attacked the Peloponnese Peninsula in Greece, capturing several key Ottoman-held fortresses. By 1687, they had taken Athens, dealing another serious blow to Ottoman prestige. Venetian fleets also raided Ottoman shipping routes in the Aegean and Ionian seas, disrupting their trade and supply lines. These victories were important because they weakened the Ottoman navy, which had long been one of the most powerful maritime forces in the world. The loss of major naval bases meant that the Ottomans could no longer control the Mediterranean as they once had. Russia joins the fight, 1686. While Austria and Venice attacked the Ottomans in the west and south, the Tsardom of Russia joined the Holy League in 1686, opening a new front in the east. For centuries, Russia had been fighting the Crimean Tatars, who were vassals of the Ottoman Empire and frequently raided Russian lands. Under the leadership of Tsar Peter the Great, Russia launched campaigns to attack the Crimean Peninsula, cutting off the Ottoman Empire's access to the Black Sea, lay siege to Azov in 1696, capturing a critical Ottoman fortress and expanding Russian influence in the region. This marked Russia's first major step toward challenging Ottoman dominance in the Black Sea, a conflict that would continue for the next 2 centuries. The Treaty of Karlowitz, 1699, the end of Ottoman expansion. After 16 years of war, the Ottomans were exhausted and forced to negotiate peace. The war officially ended with the Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699, one of the most significant treaties in European history. The terms of the treaty favored the Holy League, as the Ottomans were forced to give up vast territories. Austria gained Hungary, Transylvania, and parts of Croatia and Serbia, permanently ending Ottoman rule in Central Europe. Venice took control of parts of Greece and Dalmatia, weakening Ottoman control in the Mediterranean. Poland regained territories in Ukraine, which had been lost decades earlier. Russia secured the city of Azov, giving it access to the Black Sea for the first time. This treaty marked the end of Ottoman expansion into Europe. For the first time in centuries, the Ottomans were on the defensive, struggling to hold on to their remaining territories. The balance of power in Europe had shifted permanently, and the Ottoman Empire began its long, slow decline. The legacy of the Holy League. The formation of the Holy League and the subsequent victories over the Ottoman Empire reshaped Europe's political and military landscape. The alliance demonstrated that when European powers set aside their rivalries, they could defeat even the most powerful empires. The success of the Holy League also inspired future coalitions, such as those that later fought against Napoleon and the expansionist ambitions of France. Furthermore, the defeat of the Ottomans at Vienna and their subsequent territorial losses weakened their reputation as an invincible empire, emboldening local uprisings and nationalist movements in the Balkans. The seeds of the Ottoman Empire's eventual disintegration in the 19th and 20th centuries were planted in the battles fought by the Holy League. The Battle of Vienna in 1683 was not just a moment of victory for the Holy League. It marked the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's long and gradual decline. For centuries, the Ottomans had been the dominant power in the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa, threatening Europe with their military strength, vast resources, and highly organized administration. But after their devastating defeat at Vienna, the balance of power began shifting in favor of Europe, setting the stage for the next several centuries of conflict, expansion, and transformation. The consequences of this battle rippled far beyond the battlefield, affecting global politics, economics, military strategy, and even cultural identities. It reshaped the course of history in ways that would ultimately lead to the Ottoman Empire's eventual collapse and the rise of European dominance in world affairs. The Ottoman Empire's waning military strength. For centuries, the Ottoman army had been one of the most feared military forces in the world. Their elite Janissary corps, powerful artillery, and vast supply of manpower from their territories had allowed them to conquer vast regions. But the defeat at Vienna exposed serious weaknesses in the Ottoman military system. Declining tactical superiority, the Ottomans had relied on siege warfare and shock tactics for much of their expansion. However, European armies had improved fortifications, disciplined infantry tactics, and superior artillery that countered traditional Ottoman strategies. Logistical problems. The siege of Vienna highlighted the Ottomans' struggles with supply lines. Their long campaigns depended on vast resources, but they were unable to sustain prolonged wars against better organized European states. Janissary corruption and decline. Once an elite fighting force, the Janissaries had become increasingly corrupt and resistant to reform. Many preferred political influence over battlefield effectiveness, making them less reliable in critical engagements. Following Vienna, the Ottomans found themselves on the defensive, struggling to hold on to their territories as European armies became stronger, better organized, and more technologically advanced. The European military revolution and the age of empire. While the Ottomans were stagnating militarily, European powers were rapidly evolving. The 17th and 18th centuries saw a period of major military innovations that allowed European armies to expand their influence globally. The Battle of Vienna and the wars that followed demonstrated several key military advancements. The professionalization of armies. European states moved away from feudal levies and mercenary forces, creating permanent, professional armies trained in modern tactics. Improvements in firearms and artillery, muskets, bayonets, and field artillery became central to warfare, making traditional cavalry-heavy armies like the Ottomans less effective. Naval dominance. European states, particularly Britain, France, and the Dutch, expanded their naval power, securing global trade routes and establishing overseas empires. This military revolution allowed European powers to not only defeat the Ottomans, but also to expand their influence into Asia, Africa, and the Americas, ushering in the age of European colonialism and imperial dominance. The shift in global trade and economic power. Before the Battle of Vienna, the Ottoman Empire controlled many of the key trade routes between Europe, Asia, and Africa. The empire profited immensely from Silk Road trade, the spice trade, and Middle Eastern commerce. However, after their defeat, several factors began eroding their economic dominance. European trade expansion. With the rise of European naval empires, trade routes shifted away from the Ottoman-controlled Silk Road towards sea-based trade networks in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The rise of banking and capitalism in Europe. The economies of Britain, the Netherlands, and France thrived due to the growth of banking, finance, and international trade, while the Ottoman economy remained stagnant and over-reliant on agriculture. Technological and industrial growth. The Industrial Revolution, which would begin in the 18th century, further widened the technological gap between Europe and the Ottoman world, making it even harder for the empire to compete. The shift in economic power meant that European states became richer and stronger, while the Ottomans faced financial crises, corruption, and economic stagnation. The rise of nationalism and the weakening of Ottoman rule. One of the most long-term consequences of the Ottoman defeat at Vienna was the rise of nationalism among the various ethnic and religious groups within the empire. For centuries, the Ottomans had ruled over a vast, multi-ethnic empire, keeping diverse populations under control through military power and political alliances. However, after their loss of prestige, several problems began emerging. Christian uprisings in the Balkans. Inspired by their victories at Vienna, Christian populations under Ottoman rule, such as the Serbs, Greeks, and Romanians, began resisting Ottoman authority. Loss of European territories. Over the next 2 centuries, the Ottomans would lose control over much of Hungary, Transylvania, and the Balkans, as European states supported rebellions against Ottoman rule. Russian expansion. Russia, under Peter the Great and later Catherine the Great, used the Ottomans' weakness to expand into Crimea and the Black Sea region, challenging Ottoman control. The rise of nationalist movements would eventually lead to the breakup of the Ottoman Empire in the 19th and early 20th centuries, as Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, and other nations gained independence. The psychological impact, the fall of Ottoman prestige. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been seen as an unstoppable force, a symbol of Islamic power that dominated vast territories. The defeat at Vienna shattered this perception, both internally among Ottoman subjects and externally among European states. Ottoman leadership became more defensive, fearing further European invasions. The Sultan's authority weakened, as failures in war made military factions and political rivals more powerful. European powers grew bolder, realizing that they could challenge and defeat the Ottomans, leading to more wars in the following decades. This psychological shift was just as important as the military and economic consequences, as it signaled the beginning of the end for Ottoman dominance in Europe.